Hello, everyone. This is Teresa Toohill from Tosa Together. I'm delighted to welcome you to Tosa Talks, Building a Diverse and Thriving Community. This is an ongoing Facebook Live series was created to provide learning opportunities to foster foster meaningful discussions around racial and social justice issues. In 3 monthly presentation tracks, Tosa Together will highlight the experiences and efforts of local neighbors, community leaders, business owners, employees, and government or organizational representatives, as well as provide relevant and sought-after information from local experts on anti-racist, equity, and inclusion issues. All presentations will stream live at 7 p.m. and feature a question and answer session. Your questions are welcomed and encouraged. Tonight, we welcome you to Tosa Talks Track 3, Government and Departments Organizations, streaming live on the last Thursday of each month. We are excited to feature Dr. Phil Ertl, Superintendent of the Wauwatosa Schools, and who will be discussing the district's school equity plan. All 3 Tosa Tracks presentations in August have been focused on school equity issues. Track 1, Personal Stories, featured student alumni of color from Tosa West High School discussing their school experiences. In Track 2, Equity and Inclusion Issues, featured educational strategist Lynetta Davis speaking on equity in the classroom in the school district. All presentations can be found as videos on our Facebook page or on the Tosa Together YouTube channel. So let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce Equity and Inclusion Issues host, Dr. Tira Hildebrand, who will be tonight's presenter.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It is lovely to be here and an honor to work with this wonderful group today. So I am Tira Hildebrand. I am a Wauwatosa resident of 21 years. I have 2 children in the school district. One is a sophomore at Tosa East and one just graduated from Tosa East. So it is my pleasure to share with you, the audience, information related to our equity plan in our school district. And I am not actually doing that. That is the pleasure of Dr. Phil Ertl tonight, as well as Dr. Nasif Rogers. So we are really lucky that we have both of them, especially as school is opening very soon. This is a busy time of year. So we're very grateful for their presence tonight. So Dr. Ertl, just as a little introduction, is married to Kirsten, an orchestra teacher in Mequon-Thiensville School District. And they have 2 sons, Austin, who is at Miami of Ohio in his 2nd year, and Logan, a senior at Tosa West. Dr. Ertl has been the superintendent in Wauwatosa for 16 years. And prior to that, he was a superintendent in Kiel, Wisconsin for 5 years. Also served as a principal in Menasha, Wisconsin for 7 years, taught in Tomah, Wisconsin as well, and taught in Texas as well. So I am going to pass this off to Dr. Ertl, but before I do that, I just want to frame that we're essentially going to spend about half of our time allowing our guests to share the equity plan, the school district plan, and I peppered Dr. Ertl with a lot of questions ahead of time, so I know they're well prepared. And then we are seeking your questions, and we're hoping to be able to do a Q&A live when they are finished with their presentation. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass this off to Dr. Ertl.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and talk a little bit about what's going on in the school district, in particular in relationship to our equity work. It's been a journey over a number of years, and what we're going to try to do is talk a little bit about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. And I want to introduce Dr. Nasif Rogers, who is he's kind of new, our new director of equity. He's been with us for about a month. And already has had a huge impact in our district in just a short time. So we're going to work through a number of things. He's going to talk in particular about our equity plan as we walk through. So I am going to share my screen here. So our commitment, and we've been as a school district committed to equity for some time, and we had our opening day staff meeting today. We of course did it on Zoom, but I kind of refer to our equity plan as our umbrella over everything we do. And everything we do as a school district is underneath that broad umbrella of equity. And we're committed to fostering an inclusive community, which the opportunity gap is closed in all students, which is a key thing. All students succeed. And we don't want that just to be a moniker and just a statement. We want it to be lived in what we do as a school district and working toward that. So people often ask, what's the definition? What's your definition as a school district of equity? And we look at it, equity is the constant act of everyone engaging in purposeful, educational, social justice leadership to disrupt acts of injustice and to dismantle systems of oppression and marginalization that produce disparities in our schools. That's something we want, not as just words, but as we live it in our actions as a school district. And are we there yet? No. Are we working to get there? Absolutely. And we want to take that step and get to that point. So our history, I'm going to go back to 2014 and talk a little bit of how we ended up with an equity plan in our school district and where we're at within that. So we had a equity audit done by Dr. Elise Fertura and Colleen Capper, who are co-founders of the Integrative Comprehensive Systems back in 2014. That gave us a lot of information and really talked about things that we can be doing differently as a school district. In 2015, we joined the Closing the Achievement Gap Consortium. That is a consortium of approximately, I think we just added another school district, about 40 school districts in southeastern Wisconsin, and it includes private schools, charter schools, public school districts. I can't remember exactly the number of students, if it's like 40% of the students in the state of Wisconsin are involved in districts or schools that are part of it, but it's a large number of students. And it started with 5 school districts, and Wauwatosa was one of those districts that started and out of a conversation about closing gaps and frustration that we're not doing it and we could be doing it better if we work together at it. It's grown into a great program, and I could probably talk for about an hour on that consortium and what it means, but we are part of that and part of the leadership of that group. And I think another point that is important, we adopted, the school board, I should say, adopted a policy 5440, and I'll go into that in our next slide a little bit more on that policy. But I think to just make a really strong point, there's not a lot of school districts that have a school board policy, and I believe we were one of the first to take that step. And I think the important piece about that is if you don't have a school board that's committed to equity in a school district, you're not going to make gains. You're not going to go where you need to. And we're fortunate in Wauwatosa that we have a school board that is dedicated to that. Not only dedicated, they push it really hard, and it's important to our school board, which our school board is a representation of our community. And we know it's important to our community. So we have a school board policy that was adopted in 2015. We had a cultural relevancy audit that was done by a gentleman by the name of Reggie Morris, and Reggie is a non-educator. And we had him come in and just do an audit of our school district. He sat in the schools, he talked to people, and I think he shared some information with us that probably really wasn't too easy to listen to, but it was important for us to make growth. And I think that audit that he did for us kind of really set us on a path to say, we've got to change some of the things that are going on in our school district. We began implementing annual diversity and equity training for all staff at that point. And our first equity plan was done in 2017 and put together. So part of that annual training is we don't have training just for administrators or just for teachers. It's everybody that works in the school district. And we worked through that for the last 3 years on different equity training programs. Dr. Newell had worked with us on anti-bias behaviors, microaggressions, and identity in 3 different years. And we're continuing that training this year as well. In 2019, I know we continued. Also, we began our work in 2019 with Nurturing Diversity Partners. Reggie Jackson and Frank Kaplan have been working with our administrative team for the past 2 years. We would have monthly meetings with them for a half day, and really some important training I felt like had an impact on all of us. We were working through our our audit, and we were trying to look and say, if we're going to have growth as a school district, we need to have leaders that understand how to lead in that area and how to make sure that equity is practiced throughout our district. So that was kind of a step forward into our administrative team, and we hope to continue. We plan to continue that this year. We had to stop short last spring with our last session with them. They've been a great partner for our school district and have pushed us in places I didn't know that we could be pushed with. So, and then in 2020, we created and hired for the position of Director of Equity position. Previously, Willie Garrison, I know some people know Willie, was in a role with equity. It was changed this year to a Director of Equity position, and that is when Dr. Rogers was hired for that recently. And we're working on coaching building principles on anti-racist and anti-bias leadership practices. That's one of the things we were working on with nurturing diversity partners. We might have a good base of understanding it, but how do we lead it? What does that leadership look like in buildings? So that's something we're going to continue to work on. That policy that I mentioned before, there's a number of components that, and I would encourage people, and I can probably get that link sent out too, so people can go and read through the policy. I don't want to take the time to read through all of it, but it really is about fostering welcoming environments. For me, I try to oversimplify it and just say, I want every school building and every office in the Wauwatosa School District. When people walk into those buildings, I want them to feel like they own the buildings and it's their school or it's their building. And that's every single student, every single parent to be able to do that. So that's kind of how I look at what we're working to do. So, and you can see a number of the other components of that policy, but I would encourage you to look that up on our website as well, and I'll get that link out. So some of the critical changes that we've had over the past number of years, we've implemented instruction that drives understanding of parallel journeys. I know this past year we went through all of our elementary curriculum, in particular in social studies areas, to make sure that what we're teaching is real history, not just from one perspective. And we're going to continue that work through our secondary schools this year as well. We augmented our high school course catalog with our Black Lit class. I know there's been discussion about that previously with Tosa Together as well. We require AP Human Geography for 10th grade students. And that takes us back a little bit. Several years ago, we started working with equal opportunity schools, and we were awarded a significant grant to be able to do that. And that was a program and a group that helped us get to the point where we had our AP classes were made up of the same makeup of students that are in our general student body from a race perspective and from an SES perspective. And within our first year, we met those standards. We continue to push forward, but we know also when it comes to AP, we're one of the only school districts in the country that require an AP course for all students in human geography. And that is a required course. And we believe in high expectations for all students. And I think that was one way that we went through and said, not only do we believe it, we're going to prove it and prove that all students can be successful. And in our first year, we've had, the first 2 years, we've had good success with that. We collapsed our ELA instruction. Part of the tracking issue that is out there, I think, is really what we're talking about, and trying to reduce tracks of students, and really goes back to the same point earlier that I mentioned about high expectations for all students and pushing in that direction. Unified PE courses and making sure all students feel comfortable and confident in physical education for students with disabilities, to be involved directly into PE courses, not just specially designed PE courses. So that was a big success for us as a school district. We created a staff of color affinity group as a way to get feedback. And we need to continue to grow that. One of the challenges we have as a school district in Wauwatosa, we have between 35 and 37% students of color in our school district, and our staff of color make up less than 10%, and even lower for teachers. So we've got work to do in that area. That's a huge mission. I know Nasif and I have discussed that even in the short time that he's been here, of how important that is for us, and he certainly understands that piece too. So that's been a focus. We haven't been as successful as I would like, but that's not something we're going to give up on, because I think we can change that. And we need to for all of our students. So. And Dr. Rogers is going to talk about our equity plan moving forward.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Ertl. And so, this brief history and these key milestones in the district's path toward equity and justice has culminated in what you see here in the second iteration of the district's equity plan. And so educators Willie Garrison, Tracy Karras, Jay Henderson, and Mike Brock, and a whole host of other leaders and educators within the district and community members too, worked together over the course of the 2019 and 2020 school year to really look at where the district had been in the past couple of years, looking at some of the wins and some of the opportunities with the previous equity plan, and really looking at, what's really our mission, where is it that we want to go, and what is it that our kids and our families really need from us as a district as it relates to equity and justice. So born out of that work, those conversations, that collaboration, these three key themes, the first being opportunity. And when we talk about opportunity, when our kids and families, particularly our historically marginalized kids and families and families who, for a variety of reasons, who have not had a great partner with the school system in years past, what do they need from us? Part of that work, some of the work around that has been, making sure that kids are engaged in the curriculum that's viable and rigorous for them. Do they have the opportunity to succeed? Do they have the opportunity to see themselves reflected in what's being taught? Are their histories and perspectives validated in what's being taught and what's being explored and what's being inquired about? Do our families feel like their kids have a chance at college success because of the work that we're doing in teaching and learning with our kids? And so from that, the second theme that developed was belonging. And each of these themes have some concrete goals and steps within them. And I won't bore you with those details, but I do encourage you all to take a look at that on the website, and we will share that link too. But the second critical theme was belonging. And, once our students and families see that that opportunity does exist, then belonging is that next natural step. Do I belong to this community? Does this community, this school community, make it for me to belong? And so things to help with that is making sure that kids are proportionally represented in honors classes and classes that are designed to stretch kids in their thinking and their abilities, and their interests and things that are relevant and important to them in terms of learning. Making sure that honors classes aren't just classes that only represent our white families and students. So making sure that each family, no matter identity, ability, income status, religious faith, making sure that each and every identity and their intersections are represented in all aspects of our school community. Another key piece of that is making sure that affinity groups within our schools have space in place to gather, to discuss, to identify things that are not going well for them as a group or sometimes individually, and then taking that to school leadership to say, hey, this is going on. This is a challenge for us. This is a barrier for us. We need this addressed. So making sure that that voice, we're not giving voices to anybody. What we are doing is making sure that there's a place and space for those voices to be amplified and to be protected and to be heard by leadership so that leadership can respond to those concerns. And then also working with our staff, as Dr. Ertl mentioned earlier, working with Dr. Marquita Newell from Loyola University in Chicago, met with her today, and our work this year will center on moving away from a definitional and reflective aspect of anti-bias work and identity work, and moving towards attitudinal and behavioral aspects of identity and anti-bias and anti-racist work for collective equity capacity, building collective accountability, and making sure that we are responding to what our kids need in real time, in a way that does not diminish their identities, that doesn't offend who they are and what their family represents, but in turns strengthens their sense of belonging. And once you have those two key pillars established and functioning well, then achievement becomes easy. That becomes the easy part for us in teaching and learning. Because if we're making sure that kids have opportunities to have access to rigorous learning, have access to a viable and guaranteed curriculum, that they have access to post-secondary opportunities and support in those pursuits of those post-secondary opportunities, then achievement then raises as well. And not just for our Black and brown kids, not just for our kids who experience poverty, but for all of our kids in our school system. Achievement does raise. And there's years and years of research to demonstrate that when you have opportunity and belonging intact, and you're constantly engaged with it and consciously working towards those two elements, that achievement naturally follows an upward trajectory. And for me, what drew me to Wauwatosa, just one, hearing Dr. Ertl speak publicly and honestly about the work, and saying, we don't have it figured out. We're trying and we need some help because we want to get it right, because our kids deserve that we get this right. Assistant Superintendent Ida Cruz-Farron's excellent recruitment that attracted me, seeing a person of color in an executive cabinet and leadership who's working and centering this work in her efforts to improve the school district. And another aspect of it too was, for me personally, I'm not drawn to any positions or places just for the notoriety of it, but the professional aspect of this is personal for me. I'm a kid who needed a teacher to be who I was for my students. And it's as simple as that. And so this equity work is not a noun, and it can't be a noun anymore. It can't be a concept. It can't be an idea. It has to be a verb. It has to be action-based, and it has to be moving us towards bending that arc of justice towards all of our kids, making sure that we are doing right by each and every kid, especially the ones who have been historically marginalized and oppressed within our school systems. And so that's the element and the focus that I'm hoping to bring, and making sure that this work doesn't rest with me. It doesn't rest solely with Dr. Ertl, that it is the collective responsibility of all of us. We have to be laser focused on this work. And if we're not, then we're not doing right by kids. We are engaging in educational malpractice if we are not laser focused on this work. And it's as simple as that for us. So that's kind of where we are right now with it.
So just one last shout out to Dr. Rogers. I don't know how anybody can step in like he did to, he led the new teacher training last week after just several weeks in the district, and led our equity plan. And you can hear him talk about our equity plan like he's developed and known it for a long time. So we got a treasure in Dr. Rogers coming to Wauwatosa, and I'm really looking forward to the impact that he's going to have for all of us, on me and everybody else in our district. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you both for sharing out on the equity plan. We really appreciate it. And for those of you that are in the Facebook audience, we would love to pose the questions that you might have for our speakers tonight. I know I have one that came up when you guys were sharing out. So I'm a believer that we all hold unconscious bias, and that we, inadvertently in our daily acts, we might cause microaggressions to others unintentionally. But I'm wondering, are you explicitly teaching students about unconscious bias? Are we talking about microaggressions in the classroom? Are we talking about anti-racist behavior to our students?
Not like we need to. It needs to be much more intertwined into the work that we're doing. And it's not just a specific class where we're discussing these things. I look at our times right now that we're in, and I think it's an opportunity in schools to really have an impact and to do exactly what you're talking about. So I think there's work to be done to get that as part of our day-to-day operations and how we were talking. I think when Nasif was talking about, it's not just, the work is not on him, it's not on me, it's on all of us. And we need to, like, there's oftentimes you hear the conversation that I'm not comfortable having that conversation. I'm not comfortable leading that conversation. That's not okay anymore. If you're not comfortable, you need to get comfortable. And that's kind of how I look at it for us as adults in a school system, in the community. We need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable having those conversations, because otherwise we're not getting growth. So we've got work to do in that area to make sure that students are engaging in those conversations, not just in our Black student unions, or we try to have some of those conversations with the superintendent advisory, but that's limited as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I've been working with our instructional coaches, our directors, our principals on planning proactively and intentionally to make sure that this is happening in a systemic way. And as Dr. Ertl was saying, we're not there yet and we have a ways to go, but it's happening in pockets. But we don't want it to live in pockets. We don't want it to live in silos. We don't want it to live in our affinity groups. We want those conversations. We want those experiences. We want those challenges to happen all over our school system, in each of our school sites, and making sure that we are also equipping our educators with the tools and resources necessary to have those conversations, to facilitate those conversations, to embrace those conversations, to give them the support and coaching they need to engage in reflection once they do engage in those conversations. And when you do this work, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have hiccups. You're going to commit microaggressions. But the key is to make sure that you bounce back from it in a way that's healthy, in a way that's restorative, and in a way that shows other people your vulnerability and your willingness to learn. And that's the bottom line, is just demonstrating that willingness to learn. And if you demonstrate that, we can close these skill gaps around having these conversations.
And I'll just add, we have a number of equity coaches. So the position of director of equity, as well as our equity coaches, are all new within the past 5 years as well. And the people that have filled those positions for our equity coaches are amazing. And those conversations are what they are working on our staff with, and somewhat with the students, but it's really to coach our teachers and our staff to be able to have those conversations. So we've got a team of people working at it, and we'll keep doing that.
Great, thank you. We do have a question from our audience. So Katie Redford posed a question: how has the district changed its discipline practices given the training that staff have received over the last 4 years? Do you think you have changes yet to make?
The last part is easy, absolutely. We have changes to make, and have we made changes? Yes. The idea of, I mean, when you just look at what a suspension is and who gets suspended, and I mean, the data is pretty clear. A suspension works for nobody. And you try to look for different ways to address student behavior. To me, it goes back to what we're talking about in our equity plan. When people feel like it's their school and it's a welcoming environment and they're engaged at high levels of learning, there's less likely to be problems with behavior. So I try to look at it and say, have we made changes in that area? Absolutely. I think one example is our dress code, and that's been I see all around the state when it talks to going back to school with mask wearing and the debate about, well, you can't force that because of the dress code. And I'm like, well, I think we're in a pretty good place because our dress code it was changed for that reason because it was discriminatory. And that was not an easy change. And a lot of these changes, because schools have been doing the same things for such a long time, those are really difficult changes. And that was one that impacted our district in a really positive way. And I know people would argue against that, and I'm okay with that, but I know the impact it had. So our suspension rates have gone down, not like they need to, and in particular, not for our students of color. It's still a problem in our district. And that's where, when I go back to, it's an easy statement. We have a lot of work to do in that area, and we're going to continue to do that.
And it goes back to that theme of belonging. And, when we think about the amount of time that our kids spend at school, school is their second home. And so for a lot of our kids, they get treated like it's their home. They feel comfortable because they are welcome as if it is their home. But for some of our kids, it doesn't feel like a second home. They don't get welcome as if it is their second home. So we have to think about, if a child misbehaves at home, they don't get a suspension. They don't get kicked out of the house. They're not sent somewhere else, maybe to their room for a bit to reflect, but that's about it. And so we have to think about that. And do we afford that opportunity for home to be that feeling for all of our kids? And we have a ways to go. So it's going back to the idea of changing mindsets, changing beliefs, and engaging in that anti-bias, anti-racist, identity relevant work.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have a comment from Lynn Worley, who's part of our Tosa Together, and she is saying that she looks forward to working with the district further on a lot of these initiatives. It's wonderful that we have these groups that we can work together on this. So I just had a question as we were talking about you mentioned the affinity groups that have been created for students. So I'm wondering, how do we empower students that may not feel comfortable joining an affinity group? How do we empower them to speak their truth? Maybe there was something that happened in the hallway with a student, or maybe there was something they observed. I'm just wondering, are we encouraging students to share out like a negative experience? And I'm not in the school, so I just have no clue what that procedure's like, for example.
So I'll just touch on it and I'll let Nasif talk more, but we've worked hard to get student voice, and it's still not what it needs to be. I think our people rely on some of our clubs, and I know we have a student superintendent advisory group that I rely on in a big way, and we've only been doing that, I think, for 2 or 3 years, bringing students together from all 4 secondary schools, and it's a wide-ranging group of kids, and they give me incredibly direct feedback. So it's a direct pipeline to the superintendent of the school district, and it has an impact. I mean, when I go back to, we talk about cell phones, and when that was a big issue about whether we should have cell phones in school, that decision really wrote on the back of those kids. The dress code, if that group didn't support what we wanted to do with the dress code, that wasn't probably going to go down and happen very well, or wasn't probably going to be changed. I rely on that group quite a bit. I don't know that they recognize that I rely on it that much, because I think some of them just enjoy the pizza they get to have at lunch, but no, we want student voice. Our school board has done an awesome job of incorporating student voice in the school board. We have student school board members, and I know I feel comfortable speaking for our board members that they listen to those students, and they ask those students to bring feedback into the boardroom from a student perspective. So those are just a couple of examples.
And it also goes back to the idea of making sure that each and every kid has a relationship with a trusted adult, because that's where it starts. And it goes back to that sense of belonging. If I have that trusted adult, I have some sense of belonging. And if I trust that adult, I can be honest with that adult. And if I'm honest with that adult, I can share my experience, positive or negative. I can share ideas about improvements. I can grow as an individual. and making sure that I'm afforded the security and the safety to be here. And so it starts there. And then we can start looking at different systemic and procedural mechanisms to put in place to allow for a variety of communication avenues for kids to express themselves. If they can't get to an adult, do we have an anonymous online reporting system that we can put in place at each school for kids? Things like that. And I'm not sure if that's in place yet or not. I got to do some more digging to find out. I just, entering the fourth week on the job. So.
And we are so grateful that you jumped on the call, and we're looking forward to maybe having you back in like 6 months and you can give us a check-in.
Absolutely. I have some ideas about some partnerships with you all. So I would love to have
great.
some off-channel discussions with you.
Yeah. So we do have several more questions that came through. One is, what plans are there to bring in more guidance staff that are people of color? And I'm sure that also goes with what about teachers of color as well in terms of recruitment.
Well, one example of Dr. Rogers' position is in the HR department. So whether it's a symbolic piece that the Director of Equity is part of HR, I think it was strategic because we think that will help recruit more teachers of color into our district. And I mean, what are the plans? The plans are to do something. So what we're doing is getting us the results we have right now. So we have to look at some different plans. If we want more of the same, we keep doing things the same way. So we've made a number of changes from using Spark Hire and a lot of different recruitment methods. But, that's where Dr. Rogers is going to have a big role in helping us as a district to do more recruiting. And it's not just the recruiting of more teachers of color, but it's also the retention. It doesn't pay if we're getting teachers of color coming to our district and they don't feel that it's the best professional environment or whatever reason, and they choose not to stay. I think that's a bigger problem than if we are unable to recruit people. So it's got to be a two-pronged approach, and I struggle with it because we haven't been successful and as we would like, and we're going to keep working on it. We're dedicated to improving in that area because we know it's important. If you talk to the kids, it's important. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that second aspect of the equity plan, belonging, that applies to our staff too, and making sure our staff of color feel like they belong. And so when you look at the research around teacher retention, retention is a huge aspect of it, especially around teachers of color and staff of color. It's easier to recruit and hire a staff of color. The key is the retention. And once you build healthy retention strategies, making sure that they are supported, that they feel validated, that they feel heard, that they feel valued, and that you are providing them with opportunities to engage in leadership and not just behavior management. And, I'm the Black teacher, and so I'm going to handle all the Black issues with the Black kids. We have to stop that. We've got to disrupt that injustice because it's producing greater disparities. And so making sure that we see our staff of color also as experts in teaching and learning and curriculum development and innovation and staff development too. And so that's an aspect of it. And so when you're retaining folks of color, it spreads the word. Networks expand, and like I mentioned earlier, seeing Assistant Superintendent Cruz Farron in that position of power, that was a huge part that drew me to the district and to explore a potential partnership. So I'm definitely going to be laser focused on that as well. We've already discussed some things and reaching out to HBCUs and schools that have a great strategy around diversity and recruitment. UW-Madison just unveiled their new School of Education plan that's strictly focused on building and expanding a pipeline of educators of color. And it's a pretty fantastic one. I think they're designating like $30 million towards this initiative over the course of the next 10 years. And so I'm going to reach out to them and see if we can engage in some partnerships and looking at having our current students attend their institution and then us hiring our students. Our student school board member, Jalissa, I can't recall her last name right now, but just seeing her on one of the earlier board meetings, she's fantastic. And she would be someone who we would want to hire once she receives her bachelor degree as a teacher.
Awesome, thank you.
So just another comment too. So we've also been working with a number of higher ed organizations of trying to create a program. There's just not, it's what Dr. Rogers was speaking to. There's just not a lot of people going into education in particular. Can we find a way to create a path for students to, we're looking to combine high school and college and make it a path that students can get into, that we help cover costs and they come back and work in districts. I know the CAGC has a scholarship program to Concordia for teachers of color that are going in to education. We need to expand and build on that. So it's not, I mean, it's a significant scholarship, but not where we want to get it. So we're going to keep working in that area as well.
Yeah, and it starts in the classroom. It all comes back to the classroom again. If we have Black and brown kids whom for them their experience was a bit traumatic, I don't think they're going to want to go back to that location of trauma and work and be re-traumatized as a working professional. And so we have to make sure that the classroom and that the school is a place of belonging to allow them to see themselves coming back to that place and to thrive and grow as a working professional.
On that note, we did have a few Wauwatosa West alums, some biracial alums that spoke on Tosa Talks. They opened us up, I believe. They were our first presentation and they were amazing. Is there any way that it is possible to perhaps connect with our alumni that really understand the experience of students of color in our schools? And that, I mean, they spoke about wanting to support and wanting to help. They were amazing. Has that crossed anyone's mind at all?
I spoke about that in my interview process in connecting with alumni. I'm a parent of a graduate from Tosa East, my stepson. So it's personal to me, and I don't say that lightly. You know, he's expressed to me his experience and what he went through. Overall, it was a positive experience because he was a popular athlete, but at the same time, he hid a lot of things that were traumatic for him from the standpoint of race and belonging and being seen as just a kid who was just an athlete. And sometimes getting the feeling that he just had to shut up and dribble. And so we can't send that message to our kids. And so I would love the opportunity to connect with them and create some space, and not just a one-time event. I would love for this to be a relationship that's long-standing because we need all hands on deck.
Awesome, wonderful. We've got a question from Anne. They just keep coming in, everybody. So Anne Heidkamp, how is Tosa addressing different learning styles? When I hear things like high academic achievement and honors focus, I hear a focus on traditional classroom approaches and a drive towards four-year college. As a former MATC teacher, I know that many students are more kinesthetic learners and thrive in hands-on learning environments. How do you incorporate this in the schools? How do you promote technical careers without falling into the tracking trap or a sense that these careers degrees are valued less than four-year college degrees?
So we also have our core principles of teaching and learning that apply across our school district. And you know, that's a challenge. So we had the Tosa School of the Trades, a charter school a number of years ago that was held in the Fisher Building. And it lasted for 2 years. I think everybody felt like it was the greatest program in the world, just not for my child, because they need to go to a four-year college. And ultimately, we didn't have the enrollment that we needed. I think we're making great gains in getting people to understand that four-year college, and in some cases, two-year college, is not the path for everybody. And I think it comes down to a lot of communication, a lot of understanding. And we also really target those high expectations for all students, regardless of what you're doing after school. All the skills that we're talking about, trying to get our students to have before they leave our doors, are what they need to be successful in any chosen path after they leave Wauwatosa School District. So it's an education process, and it takes time to get there. And we've been working at that component of it. But I think we're getting, I've seen tremendous growth in that area for us, of getting better understanding with it.
I would add a couple things too. Going back to working on mindsets and beliefs and language, and making sure that we are dismantling this white heteronormative idea and concept of achievement. And achievement shouldn't be so narrow as a 4-year college university. When we're talking about the vision of a graduate, that graduate needs to define achievement for themselves. And so we need to produce citizens who are career, college, and community ready, and making sure that they can think critically, write critically, read critically, collaborate with others in a critical way, and organize in a critical way. Those are skills that are transferable across careers, across communities, across colleges, and across many different post-secondary paths. And so we have to work to expand that idea of achievement, but more importantly, let go of our definition and history and notion of achievement, and allow kids to develop their own definition and meaning of achievement. Because that's what we're working towards, making sure that they pursue their individual freedom and their vision of themselves. Our vision of graduates has to incorporate what they want to do in life and what they want to get out of life. So it's our job to help equip them with the tools necessary to make that happen.
And we did adopt a new vision of a graduate, which I will also send out so people have that as well, which speaks to what Dr. Rogers was talking about.
And there are a couple of things to help us with that too. AVID program and system, which we're heading into with our secondary schools this year, primarily with our high schools. That helps us to dismantle that singular white heteronormative notion of achievement, to open it up to all kids and identities and their intersections. And then also the launch program, which we're looking to strengthen and to enhance, and to make sure that it's responding to the differing interests that kids have in terms of careers that they may want to pursue, trades and hobbies and things like that. And just making sure that, our kids right now are really social entrepreneurs. And so this idea of a career is really antiquated. And so they're going to be engaged in many different things. And the singular focus on the career in college serves as a disservice to them. So we have to make sure that we are allowing space and place and opportunity for them to thrive in this new 21st century way of looking at living a well-examined, thriving life.
Wonderful, thank you. I know that Dr. Ertl and I earlier, when we were talking about this session, we were talking about equity in terms of the online instruction that occurred in the spring. And I'm curious sort of what kind of analysis occurred in the district in terms of, who wasn't able to participate as much in our online sort of emergency COVID spring. And then just, if you could just speak to equity related to that online instruction piece.
So in the spring, and it's one of those things that was really difficult to measure engagement. What does engagement mean? I don't think we had a real good online definition as we were moving into it in March, but we put that together, and we had about 90% engagement. And I know when people talk student achievement and people say 95% or 80%, like those numbers sound good. I tend to look at the other side of it. 90% engagement. If we have 10% that didn't turn on a computer since March, that's 700 students. And then you can, I would say, take another 10% that were minimally engaged for whatever reasons it might be. So we're talking about 14 to 1,500 students in March that basically have not had any formal education since that point in time. It's one of the things that drives me in this process of return to school, because some of those, there's a larger percentage of those students are students of color and also students with economic challenges as well. So when I see that and I see who it is, which students are not engaged, it's an issue. And if it's what, 6 months, and if we're starting back into virtual education, how many months would that be where we're just kind of saying, you know, we talk about educational malpractice. I know Dr. Rogers mentioned that in one realm. I think it's educational malpractice to not find a way to get some of our kids. And that's not all of them. I respect, you know, I've learned a lot through this process, in particular the last several weeks, and I have a lot of respect for people's decisions. But for some of our students, if we don't get them back in the building, we may lose them. And education is critically important for everybody, but for some of our neediest students and most challenged students, we need them in the building. So when it comes down to, you know, as a superintendent in this school district and trying to say, what's the best way to go back to school? I can't shake that piece of it, that it's 1,500 students have not been engaged for this many months, and how do we get them? I don't know, I struggle, and it's something that I can't get past. So I could go on forever about that, but it's a challenging piece that we got to find ways. And I say if we can get them in the building, at least we got a shot.
And we're working on it. Our administrators, particularly our principals, have been working extremely hard to really problem solve this and to really make sure we're set up for success come September 8th. And they're working long hours and getting very little sleep. So it's not lost on any of us that we need to address that, particularly in a very proactive and serious way.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a question about the enrollment at the Montessori school. So one of our listeners is a Mount Zion pastor, and he or she states, I understand there's been problems in the equity of enrollment at the Montessori school, making sure enrollment opportunity actually represents demographics, income, and race. Has that been addressed?
It's been discussed and addressed, and it's a challenge and a problem from that perspective that we have. And it's when you have sibling preference for enrollment into a specialty program and it starts out with a largely white population, that's a tough change to make. So it's an ongoing discussion. I know, for example, our WSTEM governing board is doing everything they can. They have an equity committee and trying to change and get more diversity into WSTEM, but we have with the programs, the Montessori and our STEM programs, our WSTEM program, there's some challenges left to be worked on there. So it's gotten better, but not even close to what our regular population is in all of our schools.
Great. One comment I just had is when I was doing a little bit of prep for this, I did find the equity plan on the district website. And I'm just wondering for the people that are listening, where can they find, you know, is there more than the equity plan available on the website? And what would we find if we were to dig through that?
More than an equity plan in terms of like resources and.
Right. Are there resources available for parents? And
yeah, there are. I'm working with our communications director, Sarah Fertitta, who's amazing, by the way, on updating the website. We've made a couple tweaks already. So I have a few draft forms of things in terms of language and presentation for that particular page. And then making sure that I include a parent link on there for resources in terms of how to advocate for my child at school, how to have race talks and things like that. And some of those resources are there, but we need to clean it up a bit and make it much more user-friendly and delineated for parents, for educators, and for students and community members. So it's a work in progress right now. But hopefully I'm looking to have it drastically improved by the end of September.
Wonderful, thanks. And I know the school district has been sending families a lot of different information over the last few months about anti-racist resources and things like that. So as a parent, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do that too.
So we only have a few more minutes, and I had the pleasure of introducing a little bit about Dr. Ertl and his background, but we didn't really hear enough about you, Dr. Rogers. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and just, I mean, you told us what attracted you to the district, but you know, what do you like to do, and what's a little more about your background?
Sure. So currently in grad school right now, so I'm not quite doctor yet. I'll be that hopefully in a few months. But attending UW-Madison in the Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis program with a concentration on social justice leadership and equity policy. So it's going hand in hand with work life right now. But I've been an educator for about 15 years now, and about 12 years formally in the K-12 setting. Attended undergrad at Ripon College, which is what brought me to Wisconsin, from the south side of Chicago. So I was born and raised there. Let's see, happily married to my wife, who's also an educator, Tosa Rogers. She's a principal in the Wauwatosa School District, born and raised here. She's a proud Packers fan. I'm a proud Bears fan. So it makes Sundays in the fall interesting in our home. Although she's a little nicer to my team than I am to hers. So, but a few things about me. I love to cook. If I wasn't an educator, I would probably be in the restaurant business or in like private catering, something like that. I love to read about politics and society. I have a strong interest in the human story and in just individual human stories and how people make sense of the world, how people thrive in the world, how people survive in the world, and more importantly, how people build bridges and coalitions. And so the late John Lewis has been heavy on my heart lately, just his life and what he meant to the world, not just for the civil rights movement, but for government, for politics, for education, and just serving as a beacon and a bright light for young people to be active and to cause a lot of good trouble. And so I'm looking forward to working with our young people in our district to cause some good trouble.
And that's a great closing. I love it. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Ertl, for agreeing to be on the panel, and of course, bringing in Dr. Rogers. We really appreciate your time. Obviously, this is a really busy time, so we really appreciate it. And thank you for our live Facebook audience for your participation and your engagement and your comments and your questions. We really appreciate it. And we hope that everyone is able to catch our next series next month. We have 3 Tosa Talks presentations for September. We have a panel discussion with the Tosa Together founders for the personal stories presentation. That's going to be on Tuesday, September 8th. And then we have Chantel McKenzie, CEO and Principal Strategist at PowHer Network. She's going to be our Equity and Inclusion Issues guest speaker on the 3rd Wednesday, which is September 16th. And then our 3rd session is going to be hosted, actually our guest speaker is Wauwatosa Mayor Dennis McBride, who's going to join us for the Government Departments and Organizations presentation on the 24th, the last Thursday of September. So again, I'm Tira Hildebrand, and it was really a pleasure to be with all of you tonight, and we really appreciate all the work that you're putting in for the good of our kids. As a parent, I'm very grateful. So thank you so much, Dr. Ertl and Dr. Rogers. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.